In the 4th century before Christ, the Eastern Mediterranean was a region dominated by complex political dynamics. The Greek city-states, especially after the Peloponnesian Wars, were worn out both economically and militarily due to long years of internal struggles. Athens had moved away from its former naval power, Sparta had lost its influence in its struggle for hegemony, and Thebes, despite its short-lived rise, had failed to establish lasting leadership. This political fragility made the Greek world vulnerable to external threats. Just at this moment, Macedonia, located north of the Greek world and long regarded as semi-barbaric, was undergoing a profound transformation. When Philip II ascended the throne, Macedonia was a scattered and weak kingdom, worn down by attacks from neighboring tribes. But Philip's reforms, the reorganization of the phalanx with long spears called sarissa, the transformation of the cavalry into a professional class, and the establishment of a permanent and disciplined army, constituted a revolution not only for Macedonia but for all ancient military history. Neutralizing the tribes in the Balkans, expanding his influence in Thessaly, and skillfully manipulating the conflicts among the Greek city-states quickly made Macedonia the strongest military and political center of the region. The birth of Alexander took place right in the middle of this great transformation. The strong state built by his father would form the foundation for future conquests. In a sense, the entire world was beginning to prepare for the young prince who would step onto the stage of history. Born in Pella in 356 before Christ, Alexandros was raised not only as the son of a king but also as a child of elite intellectual circles. His mother Olympias, being of Epirot origin, created both a mystical and political consciousness in Alexander's inner world. Olympias instilled in her son a strong belief that they descended from the gods. This strengthened the charismatic leadership perception that would accompany Alexander throughout his life. Alexander's education consisted of the most distinguished figures of the era. Alongside the military discipline he received at a young age, he also received intensive education on philosophy, medicine, zoology, political theory, geography, art, and poetry under the guidance of Aristotle. Aristotle not only gave Alexander knowledge, he also gave him an intellectual framework and a perspective through which to interpret the world. Homer's Iliad ceased to be just a book for Alexander and became a personal guide. The heroic ideals of Achilles turned into a way of life for him. His taming of the wild horse Bucephalus during childhood not only impressed the palace but also became an early sign of his leadership charisma. This event was the beginning of one of the most famous ruler-horse relationships in history. Young Alexander, shaped by both palace upbringing and military discipline, was turning into a commander who would change the fate of the world. In 336 before Christ, the assassination of Philip II by a guard during a wedding ceremony dragged Macedonia's future into uncertainty. The reasons and background behind the assassination are still debated by historians. However, the consequences were clear: the kingdom suddenly lost its leader, and many enemies seized the opportunity to move again. The accession of Alexander, who was only 20 years old, was not a simple succession event. Internal palace factions and, externally, the Greek city-states and Balkan tribes immediately showed signs of rebellion. Alexander responded to these threats swiftly and decisively, eliminating rival nobles and gaining the confidence of the army. He established his authority across a wide geography from Thessaly to Thrace, from the Greek cities to the Macedonian tribes. The near-complete destruction of Thebes during its uprising demonstrated the ruthless but effective aspect of his leadership. On one hand he inherited his father's legacy, and on the other he sent a strong message to the entire Greek world: Macedonia's authority was indisputable, and the young king would not remain in his father's shadow. One of Alexander's most critical steps was securing Macedonia's northern and western borders. For the tribes in the Balkan Peninsula were warrior communities that recognized no central authority, seized moments of Macedonian weakness to rebel, and could vanish into endless mountain regions and return with raids. These groups needed to be subdued, because Alexander had the goal of taking advantage of the wealth in Asian lands, and his massive campaign against the Persians could remain under constant logistical threat. Therefore, the young king knew very well that he had to fully secure his back in the Balkans before crossing into Asia. This process began in before Christ 335 with the campaign against the Triballi. The Triballi were a tribe living south of the Danube River, known for their bravery and aggressive raiding tactics. Alexander's advance into the region was not only a military movement but also a show of force, reaffirming Macedonia's claim to dominance in the north. As Alexander passed his army through the steep passes of Mount Haemus, the tribal forces had hidden at the foothills and ambushed the Macedonian units. But Alexander, displaying extraordinary control even in such terrain, managed to keep the phalanx organized in the narrow passes. When Tribalian archers and spearmen attacked from the hills, Alexander had his troops assume a testudo-like protective formation, neutralizing the arrow fire. Then, as the Triballi warriors withdrew to the southern Danube, Alexander was drawn into much more challenging terrain. As he pursued the retreating enemy, he advanced by accounting for the dense forested landscape, the riverbanks prone to flooding, and the scattered settlements of the region. When he finally reached the area where the Tribalian king was located, the tribal warriors attempted to trap the Macedonian army on the riverbank. But Alexander deployed his troops silently to different points overnight and launched a sudden multi-directional assault at dawn. The heavy defeat of the Triballi was not only a military victory but also a message of determination to the northern tribes. After this success, the Balkan campaigns expanded westward. In Illyrian lands, tribal alliances led by Clitus and Glaucias challenged Macedonian rule, seizing Philip's death as an opportunity. Illyrian warriors were renowned for their agility, sudden ambush capabilities, and masterful use of mountainous terrain. In this campaign Alexander encountered a series of difficult geographical challenges that tested the flexibility of his army. Pelion, known as Glaucia's fortress, had a natural defensive line surrounded by cliffs and forests. Alexander's siege here showed how skilled the young king was in both siege tactics and psychological warfare. When the danger arose of being encircled by Illyrian forces at Pelion, Alexander withdrew his troops with incredible discipline, allowing no disorder. Then, using the darkness of night, he broke through the Illyrian encirclement and at dawn routed the Illyrian army with an unexpected attack, which went down as one of the most effective maneuvers of the Balkan campaigns. This event demonstrated that the Macedonian army could prevail not only in major pitched battles but also in narrow passes, steep valleys, dense forests, and under siege. The Balkan campaigns also carried a symbolic message. Macedonia was a centralized kingdom that allowed no internal instability and whose borders were defended by strong military discipline. With the submission of the Balkan tribes, the northern borders were secured, and no power capable of threatening the Macedonian army from the rear remained. Thus, when Alexander planned his great campaign into Asia in 334 before Christ, he knew his authority had been solidified in every corner of the Balkans. As a result, Although the Balkan campaigns may appear secondary in Alexander's career, they were in fact a critical preparation phase that determined the fate of the Asian expedition. If Alexander had not subdued the tribes in the Balkans, he would have felt a constant threat behind him during the war with the Persians, and the conquest process would have slowed down or perhaps completely failed. For this reason, the Balkan campaigns have taken their place in history as one of the cornerstones of Alexander's grand strategy. Before Alexander's great campaign began, the Persian Empire was struggling with its own internal problems. Conflicts over the throne had occurred among the Achaemenid nobles, and some satrapies had begun to act almost independently. In regions like Egypt and Babylon, local priestly classes weakened the central authority. The accession of Darius III had not ensured complete unity throughout the empire. Especially, the Greek cities in western Anatolia were unhappy with Persian rule. Commercial rivalry increased in Phoenicia. The tax burden had grown in Mesopotamia. The Persian army was still vast and magnificent, but due to excessive diversity it was weak in unity and discipline. Most of the army was under the control of local satraps, which made centralized command difficult. Alexander analyzed this situation very well. War was not only a military operation but also an opportunity. Macedonia's small but disciplined army could have an advantage against the Persians' large but fragmented forces. Alexander emulated mythological heroes such as Heracles and Achilles. He saw himself as an instrument of divine destiny. To him, the conquest of Asia was not an ordinary war but a journey through which he would engrave his name in world history with golden letters. And with these thoughts he began the Great Asian Campaign. When Alexander crossed the Hellespont in 334 before Christ and set foot on Anatolian soil, he found before him the western satrapies of the Persian Empire. These satrapies, especially the regions covering Mysia, Cilicia, and Phrygia, were both natural obstacles to Alexander's advance and the first test of Persian control. The Persian military presence here was numerically superior to the Macedonian army but weak in terms of command and coordination. The satraps, preoccupied with Darius's eastern campaigns and palace politics, could not unite under a central command. Alexander analyzed this weakness very well. Although each satrap appeared strong in his own region, they acted independently of one another, and their coordination could be disrupted by a rapid Macedonian attack. The Persian army gathered near the Granicus River aimed both to block the Macedonian crossing and to secure control of western Anatolia. But this resistance was not only an obstacle for Alexander, it was also an opportunity to test his army on a real battlefield. The Granicus was not only the first gateway to Anatolia but also the critical test before Alexander directly confronted the Persian administrative center. The river's narrow crossings and the strong Persian cavalry elements created some of the toughest conditions for the Macedonian standard phalanx tactics. But Alexander positioned his army with agility and flexibility, using the experience gained in the Balkan campaigns. While the phalanx units took defensive positions along the riverbank, the Hetairoi cavalry were held ready on the wings. Alexander's tactic was clear: fix the Persian strength in the center, create a gap on the wings, and then break the enemy's balance with a swift wedge-shaped attack. This was a method repeatedly tested and successfully applied in the Balkan mountain battles, but at the Granicus it was being applied in open terrain and against overwhelming numerical superiority for the first time. When the battle began, the Persians attacked the Macedonians from the narrow river crossings. The initial contact was a high-risk clash for both sides. The risk was great that the army might scatter and become vulnerable during the river crossing, but under Alexander's leadership the Macedonians maintained their discipline. Alexander personally took place on the right wing, boosted the morale of his troops with his courage, and in critical moments made the correct decisions, breaking the Persian center's defense. The Hittite cavalry entered through the intended gap and dispersed the Persian satraps. Despite their numerical superiority, the Persian army collapsed and many satraps were either killed or forced to flee. The Granicus became the gateway for the Macedonians into Anatolia and was recorded as the first great victory of the Asian expedition. The Granicus victory was not just a military success, it also shook Persian control in Anatolia. Many satraps, acting independently of the central administration, chose to surrender to Alexander. This gave moral strength to Alexander's army and opened strategic areas for his direct advance into Inner Asia. The fall of especially Thrace and Mysia satrapies secured Alexander's logistical routes and made the transition into the inner regions of Anatolia smooth. Furthermore, this victory sent a strong message to the Greek cities: the Persians might still be a threat to Europe, but the young Macedonian king had now emerged as an active power on Asian soil. After the Granicus, Alexander's advance through Anatolia continued rapidly, and the Persian satrapies became increasingly defenseless against the Macedonian army strengthened by the Balkan victories and the Granicus experience. Although the Persian Empire was vast in territory and population, its central authority was weak. Thus the satraps in Anatolia tried to protect their own interests and delayed implementing Darius's orders. Alexander's Granicus victory served to tighten these loose ties in Anatolia and forced the satraps to surrender. Alexander analyzed very well the geographic and political complexity of Anatolia. As he moved east, he observed that each satrap acted independently in his own region and that their military resources were scattered and uncontrolled. This was an advantage for the Macedonians, because Darius's central command was far away and the satraps were busy defending their own regions. Alexander used this information as the basis for his strategy of breaking Persian forces apart before they could confront him under a centralized command. By 333 before Christ, Darius III realized Alexander was advancing too rapidly and felt directly threatened. The Persian king gathered the strongest satraps in Anatolia and deployed the army in the narrow plain near Issus in southern Anatolia. Darius's strategy was based on confronting the Macedonians in a narrow area with the numerically superior Persian army and encircling them with wing pressure to annihilate them. Darius positioned himself and the royal guards in the center of the army. The wings were filled with different satrap units. The Persian army's numerical superiority was obvious, yet the coordination between the center and the wings was weak. Alexander had anticipated this and prepared his battle plan to turn this lack of coordination to his advantage. For Darius, Issus was the first serious test against the threat posed by a young king coming from Europe. Since the battle took place in a narrow plain, the Persians' numerical superiority could not be fully utilized. Alexander turned this geographical limitation into an advantage. While the phalanx units were fixed in the center, the Macedonian cavalry were kept ready to maneuver on the wings. Alexander took place in the front ranks to keep the morale of his army high, motivating the soldiers with his courage and charisma. When the battle began, Alexander performed a series of maneuvers designed to pin the Persians on the wings and open the intended gap in the center. This move rendered the center of Darius's army vulnerable. Alexander personally advanced into this gap, posing a direct threat to the Persian king. Darius panicked in the face of the Macedonian pressure and was forced to abandon the battlefield. This retreat severely shook the morale of the Persian army and accelerated the decision of many satraps in Anatolia to surrender to Alexander. The victory at Issus revealed not only the military capacity of the Macedonian army but also its strategic coordination and leadership abilities. The experiences of the Balkans and the Granicus had allowed Alexander to turn the numerical superiority of the Persian army into an advantage. This victory broke Persian authority in the western parts of Anatolia, forced local satraps to surrender, and enabled Alexander to advance further into the interior of Asia more rapidly. Issus was also a psychological turning point. Under the leadership of the young king, the Macedonians began to feel almost invincible. The Persian army, meanwhile, suffered a severe blow both physically and morally. This situation bought Alexander time for the next great battles, because the central forces of Darius had to be reorganized. By 331 before Christ, Alexander had advanced through Anatolia and the Levant, effectively taking control of Persia's western satrapies. After the defeat at Issus, Darius III planned a counterattack on a historical scale to protect the integrity of the empire. The plain of Gaugamela was chosen as the place where the Persians could use their numerical superiority most effectively, a wide and flat area ideal for war chariots and heavy cavalry. Darius strategically positioned the Persian army in the center and wings. The most loyal royal guards and elite satrap units took their place beside him. Their numerical superiority over the Macedonians increased the Persian leaders' confidence. However, this superiority was overshadowed by a lack of coordination and the absence of commanders capable of making quick decisions on the field. Darius's army was spread over a wide area. This increased confusion in the center and the tendency of the wings to act independently. Before Gaugamela, Alexander underwent a significant period of intelligence gathering and preparation. He carefully analyzed the tactics of the Persians, their terrain advantages, and their numerical superiority. He devised a plan that would limit the Persian army's ability to expand, create a gap in the center through flawless coordination of the Macedonian phalanx and cavalry, and deliver a deadly wedge attack with the Hetairoi cavalry. Alexander also strengthened the morale and discipline of the army. The experiences gained from the Balkan and Asian campaigns increased his ability to manage the psychology of the soldiers and to surprise the enemy with rapid maneuvers. Alexander was preparing his army for war not only as a military leader but also as a strategic psychologist. When the Battle of Gaugamela began, the wings of the Persian army spread out in a wide arc to encircle the Macedonians. Alexander deliberately pulled his right wing slightly back, causing the Persian army to create a gap in its center. This provided a deadly entry point for the Hetairoi, the main cavalry unit of his army. Alexander headed directly for the Persian center and reached Darius's side. This pressure drove the Persian king into panic and forced him to retreat. Darius's flight completely collapsed the morale of the Persian army. The wings dispersed, the war chariots became ineffective, and the central authority collapsed. This victory not only proved the strategic superiority of the Macedonian army but also accelerated the effective collapse of the Persian Empire. The victory at Gaugamela completely opened the path for Alexander's advance into the interior of Asia. Persian centers such as Babylon and Susa were now approaching Macedonian control. The satrapies surrendered to Alexander due to the collapse of central authority. This provided great advantages both logistically and psychologically. The victory revealed Alexander's military genius and strategic foresight. His army not only balanced numerical superiority but also overturned the Persian Empire through rapid maneuvers, psychological pressure, and a center-periphery strategy. This victory showed that Alexander was not only a conqueror but also one of the most advanced military strategists of his era. After the victory at Gaugamela, Alexander turned toward the heart of the Persian Empire. Babylon and Susa were critical centers for the Persians both politically and economically. These cities housed the empire's administration, treasury, and logistical resources. Alexander aimed to consolidate both his military and political superiority by capturing these cities. However, advancing east required not only military success but also major logistical planning. The Macedonian army had to contend with both hot climates and long distances. Using the experience gained from the Balkan and Anatolian campaigns, Alexander secured the roads, organized supply lines, and turned relations with the local population into a strategic tool. When Alexander's army reached Babylon, the city held great moral and strategic importance. The Persians had been unable to fully establish a defense structure due to the collapse of central authority. Here Alexander combined classical siege techniques with psychological warfare methods. The city surrendered quickly. Both the populace and the local administration had their resistance broken. In Susa, Alexander strengthened the financial resources of his army by seizing the Persian treasury. This was not only a military victory but also a critical step showing that the Macedonians could take over administration without directly interfering with the economic life of the local population. The capture of Susa fully opened the path for Alexander's advance eastward. Crossing from eastern Anatolia into the regions of Bactria and Sogdiana became a major test for Alexander. These regions were known for their challenging geography, mountainous terrain, and independent local populations. Resistance movements wore down the Macedonian army both militarily and logistically. Here Alexander did not only use military force, he also built ties with the local aristocracy through diplomacy and marriage. His marriage to Roxanne is the most well-known example of this policy. This marriage facilitated integration with the local population and became a symbol of his vision to unite the empire's different cultures. Alexander's grand vision was not merely territorial expansion, it was to unite different cultures under a common administrative structure. The Macedonian-Persian mixed administration, the inclusion of local peoples in governance, and the creation of multinational forces in the army formed the basis of his imperial understanding. This strategy reduced Persian cultural resistance while ensuring that the Macedonians were accepted as a lasting power in the interior of Asia. Alexander tried to create a common identity among the soldiers and local administrators. This ensured post-war security and laid the foundation for long-term political stability. The Eastern campaigns revealed Alexander's military genius and strategic foresight. The fall of the Persian capitals was part of a chain of victories extending from Anatolia to Mesopotamia and beyond. At the same time, these campaigns revealed that Alexander was not only a conqueror but also a leader with diplomacy, cultural integration, and administrative ability who had a vision of building an empire. For the Macedonians, these campaigns were a higher step beyond the Balkan Wars and Anatolian experiences. The march into Asia had now become not only a military goal but also a cultural and political challenge. With the experience gained here, Alexander developed his strategy of spreading the empire to broader regions. In 327 before Christ, Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush mountains and descended into the Indus Valley. Along the way he encountered small tribes and city-states. Most surrendered without a fight, while some showed brief resistance. Alexander had bridges built, garrisons established, and trade routes secured to take control of the western bank of the valley. This advance was a vital preparatory phase for the army to reach the interior of India smoothly. Alexander's greatest challenge in India began when he confronted the powerful King Porus on the banks of the Hydaspes River. Porus's magnificent army of war elephants created great psychological pressure on the Macedonian soldiers. Although the flooded river and monsoon rains made the crossing difficult, Alexander managed to move his army across the riverbank through a night raid. During the battle the phalanx units clashed with the elephants, while the cavalry units broke Porus's wings. After a fierce struggle, Alexander won the victory, but he was greatly impressed by the courage shown by Porus. For this reason, despite Porus's defeat, he left him as king and expanded his lands, binding him to his own authority. After the victory at Hydaspes, Alexander's goal was to advance farther east, to the Ganges River. But his army had been worn down by years of campaigns, mountains, deserts, the humid climate, and monsoon rains. Moreover, word had spread of the existence of the Nanda Empire beyond the Ganges, with much larger armies. Under these conditions the soldiers refused to march further. Despite days of talks, when Alexander could not persuade them, he was forced to give the order to return. This became the easternmost limit of his conquests. The return journey was itself an epic. While part of the army returned by sea, Alexander chose the most difficult route, the Gedrosian Desert. During this desert crossing, thousands of soldiers died from thirst, storms, and hunger. Despite all difficulties, Alexander succeeded in reaching the west with his army. Although the Indian campaign had ended, this great march to the east further solidified Alexander's fame, turning him into a ruler who pushed the boundaries of the known world. In 323 before Christ, Alexander was staying in the center of the city after a great chain of victories in Babylon. His army was at its peak in terms of morale and strength due to the conquests in the interior of Asia. Persian lands were now under Macedonian control. But in Babylon, a sudden and unexplained illness threatened Alexander. According to historical accounts, Alexander suffered for several days from a high fever, severe abdominal pain, and weakness. Some sources suggest that this may have been due to a severe fever, typhoid, or a form of malaria infection. Other sources discuss the possibility of poisoning. Alexander's illness progressed rapidly. Despite the interventions of his army and his advisors, the leader of the kingdom grew increasingly weak. It is believed that his death took place over several days or weeks. During this period he continued to remain a hero in the eyes of his army and people, both physically and psychologically. In the days near his death, the people of Babylon and the Macedonian soldiers felt great uncertainty about the future. For Alexander had died at a very young age and unexpectedly. Alexander's death was not merely the loss of an individual, it meant the sudden collapse of the central authority of the empire. He left behind neither an adult heir nor a clear plan to administer the empire. This created a deep power vacuum among the generals known as the Diadochi and paved the way for the fragmentation of the empire. At the same time, a severe collapse occurred in the morale of the soldiers. After years of campaigns and victories, they were forced to question their own fate in the absence of their leader. After his death in Babylon, Alexander held symbolic significance for both the Persian and Macedonian worlds. The mourning and turmoil that began immediately after his death accelerated political maneuvers in different regions of the empire. The generals quickly sought to secure both their own safety and regional authority. This process showed that the void created by Alexander's sudden death was not only a short-term crisis but also the beginning of a long-term transformation that would define the political structure of the Hellenistic period. After Alexander's death, the conflicts that began among the generals divided the empire into three main regions. Macedonia and the Greek cities came under the control of Antigonus and Cassander. Egypt came under the rule of Ptolemy. The inner regions of Asia remained under the control of Seleucus and the other generals. This fragmentation is a political reality that emerged after Alexander's military conquests. The great empire was forced to break apart under different cultural groups and without central authority. However, this division did not prevent the spread of Hellenistic culture. On the contrary, it allowed new cultural syntheses to form in different geographies. Alexander's most enduring legacy goes beyond military conquests to cultural and political influences. His empire encompassed a wide area not only in terms of territory but also in ideas and culture. The mixed Macedonian-Persian administration, the inclusion of local populations in governance, and cultural interaction between cities shaped a Hellenistic world stretching from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. The cities founded by Alexander and the military garrisons he established enabled the merging of Greek culture with local traditions. This initiated a new era in science, art, philosophy, and trade. Cities such as Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis became centers of this cultural synthesis. Alexander's military strategy influenced not only his era but all of history. The principles of phalanx and cavalry coordination, speed, psychological superiority, and control of territory formed a model for future commanders. The experience he gained during long campaigns stretching from the Balkans to the interior of Asia constituted a unique example for the management of both small units and large armies. The tactics he applied in battles such as Gaugamela and Issus were designed to defeat the numerically superior Persian armies. His siege techniques and logistical management increased the effectiveness of the Macedonian army both in wartime and in peace. The chaos that began with Alexander's death made his legacy controversial, yet his impact is undeniable. His conquests led to the spread of Hellenistic culture into the Middle East, Anatolia, and Egypt. The Diadochi kingdoms created by his generals continued Alexander's ideals in different geographies. Critics emphasize his ruthlessness and boundless ambition, while historians highlight his strategic genius, his vision of cultural integration, and his charismatic leadership. Alexander entered history as one of the most influential figures of the ancient world, both as a human being and as a commander and emperor. His story is not only one of wars, it is the story of political intelligence, cultural vision, and a legacy that left lasting effects on human history.